The Goat House is back with 24 big-name NFL players that could get cut this offseason. So some of these guys actually would surprise some people if they got cut. Some would be a little surprising, and maybe some of you are expecting some of these guys to get cut. Check out part 1 with the most likely cuts to happen. But let's break down these players. Let's start with the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. And a couple weeks ago, it felt like for sure Aaron Rodgers was going to get cut. But now Aaron Glenn gets hired. The quarterback offseason situation's a disaster, meaning it's not really easy to find a solution at the quarterback position, and it's sounding like they may keep Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see. This would be an interesting one. I don't think it would shock a ton of people, but that's a big-name guy that gets cut, and then the Jets need a quarterback, so it's a big situation. They would designate him a post-June 1st cut. He would be released before June 1st, but they would get the cap space. Then it would be $9.5 million in savings for the Jets. So definitely one of the big-name Jets guys to watch. And the other big-name Jets player that could be cut, Davante Adams. And you would think if Rodgers stays, then maybe Adams stays. If Adams stays, maybe Rodgers stays. But he has a significant cap hit this year, one where I don't see how they just kind of leave that contract alone. So I don't think it's the matter of keeping him or cutting him. I think it's the matter of reworking the deal so we can keep him or you cut him. Because if they cut him today, they would have an extra $29.9 million in cap savings to work with. That is significant. If you designate him a post-June 1st release, you would get 36.2. Each team only has a couple of those moves a year. You would definitely have to use one on Aaron Rodgers, because if you don't, you would actually lose money. So that is not a scenario for Aaron Rodgers. So be interested to see what happens with Adams. I don't think the contract gets left alone just because how significant the cap charges are for this season. So obviously the Rams are now looking to trade Cooper Kupp, and that was announced by Cooper Kupp on social media. Pretty interesting. But and the reason why he's on this video, I do think there is a shot he is actually cut rather than traded. I may be close to 50-50. Let me tell you why. If a team acquires Cooper Kupp, he comes with a $20 million cap charge. No team wants that at this stage of Cooper Kupp's career. But, of course, it's an option of the Rams paying a portion of the salary to help facilitate the trade, and the team acquiring Kupp could rework his deal. So it's certainly possible. But, man, these teams got to be going, yeah, if we don't trade for him, the Rams might end up cutting him, and then we can get him without trading for something. We can just sign him at any price that we decide to sign him at. And I do think the teams will be limited on who's actually interested. The Rams are trying to help Cooper Kupp out, finding the right landing spot. That limits the teams. The team's got to have to need a slot receiver, have to want Cooper Kupp at where he's at in his career, have to want to trade for him. Pay that amount of money. He's under contract in 2026. So there probably are some teams that are interested, but there's a lot of obstacles there. So that kind of makes me think a cut is definitely possible. And if the Rams do it the old-fashioned way, $7.5 million cleared. If they designate him a post-June 1st release, they clear a bit more there, and he would be available before June 1st. Of course, I do think there is, I don't want to say it's either cut or traded. I think there is a small chance that they seek a trade and the Rams show Kupp that it's really hard to do. It's really not possible, and they agree on a rework deal, and he stays with LA. And I do think he really deep down he kind of mentioned that in social media on Twitter as well, that he wants to retire as a Ram. So that actually is a possibility still, but it's not just a guarantee that he's going to be traded, even though it's possible. Here's one that would definitely surprise some people. The Jags receiver Christian Kirk, a decision to be made on him. Obviously a very good slot receiver, but does maybe have some durability concerns because of the injuries over the last couple of years. In Liam Cohen, new head coach. We'll see how he feels about him. Cohen's slot receiver from Tampa is a free agent if he gets the free agency, if he's not tagged. That is Chris Godwin. So would the Jaguars move on from Kirk and make a move for Godwin if he's available? Could be pretty interesting. So they'll have to sit down and decide. I don't think they would use the post-June 1st move on him, but maybe. But they could clear right away by cutting him $10.4 million. You would think Kirk's maybe a little too valuable for that, but if they feel like he can't stay healthy and they can't really fully trust him, hey, maybe they're going, we'd rather have that amount of cap space. So interesting one there, and could be a solid receiver that's available if cut. Kyle Van Noy has been very solid, better than expected actually for the Baltimore Ravens at his age, but he's getting up there in age. Only $4.5 million in savings, but the Ravens are pretty damn thin on cap space. They're not able to maybe make the moves they want to make, and they have a key free agent like Ronnie Stanley, for an example. So maybe they move on from him, try to get a pass rusher through the draft, clear $4.5 million. It's not 100% necessary for them to do. Just one to watch out for here. A guy towards the end of his career who's still pretty solid, could be released by the Ravens just so they can have a little bit of spending money here in the offseason. Geno Smith is a big name to watch this offseason. He may not necessarily be cut, but he could be moved. He could be a trade candidate given other teams looking for an experienced quarterback, maybe desperate for that. On an expiring deal, so they're not locked in long term. And the other quarterback options out there aren't the greatest, so maybe teams think Geno Smith's pretty appealing. The Seahawks also need to clear cap space. $31 million would be a lot, so he may not be cut, he may not be traded, could be one or the other, or he could just be the starting quarterback for the Seahawks next season. So a very interesting name to watch this offseason, but $31 million is a lot of savings. Another Seahawks player, Uchenna Nwosu, who is a solid pass rusher for them. Obviously, this new staff really isn't tied to him. They brought him in a few years ago. A very good player when he's on the field, but also has durability concerns. So he could be a cut, whether it's normal cut or designated as a post-June 1st release, freeing a bit more space. And he might be their best pass rusher, though, so it would be a tough decision. But another interesting name to watch this offseason. But one more for the Seahawks, and that is Draymond Jones, who is a big-time addition for them a couple offseasons ago and was supposed to be big-time, but it's been a little underwhelming. I said it going into last year. I kind of viewed him and Leonard Williams as the same role of player, and they tried to make both work. They both can work, but to me, I think it's one or the other, especially when you have this much money on the line. So they can move on from him, clear $11.5 million, but then you have a pretty solid defensive lineman in free agency if he is released. So some interesting players to watch for the Seattle Seahawks because they're big-name players, but because they need to free space, and they have a lot of ways. Looking at the part one video we did, there's a couple guys they're probably going to release. Pretty big names. They can clear some space. So they're a pretty intriguing team this offseason. Jonathan Allen is another one of those names on this video that would really surprise people probably. And I'm not sitting here saying he's going to be cut, but it's a thought. It's a thought for the Washington Commanders. You know, Dan Quinn doesn't really have ties to Jonathan Allen. Obviously, Dan Quinn just got there last year. He played very well for them. They have Daron Payne. They have Johnny Newton. They could look to add other guys. You know, maybe Odigizua, who's played for Dan Quinn. They could draft guys as well. So maybe they move on and free a whopping $16.5 million. The problem is maybe he's worth the $16.5 million because he's a really good football player. The other reason that they may not do it, the Commanders don't necessarily need the $16.5 million. They have a lot of cap space, but man, they would feel really comfortable with that much extra space as well. So this is kind of, this video is full of big name guys that could be cut, some surprises, some big time surprises. This is more on the big time surprise. It is somewhat possible. Maybe don't count on it, but we'll keep an eye on Jonathan Allen. It could be a top free agent available if he is cut. In my opinion, something is going to happen with Joey Bosa this offseason, and with the Chargers either cutting him and freeing $25.4 million or reworking his deal and him staying for a lot cheaper, because they're most definitely not going into the season with his current contract, his current cap hit. So something's going to happen here. It's not going to be he stays or he goes. It's going to be a rework deal or he goes. With that amount of money, $25.4 million, even though the Chargers don't really need it, they have a ton of cap space. More likely leaning towards him being cut right now, but we'll watch for a rework deal. They have a situation with Khalil Mack. They want to bring him back. How long do you bring him back for? How much money do you give him at his age? He's still a baller, though. But this is a big name. Joey Bosa, maybe he hasn't lived up to full expectations. We know he's talented as long as he's healthy, but if he's available via free agency after a cut, and it's not the strongest free agency class, but with the cut candidates, it can become very, very strong. We got a huge name here. Could he wind up with the San Francisco 49ers in his brother Nick Bosa? I think that's a strong possibility if he's released. That would be something. Here's one that it doesn't really feel like it's going to happen at this moment with the Detroit Lions and somewhat newly acquired at trade deadlines, Zadarius Smith, and he played very well for them. It only frees $5.7 million. The Lions have a decent amount of cap space, so first glance, like they just got him, so at first glance, it's like probably not, but I'd say there's a scenario, there's an opportunity of them doing this because he's up there in age. It's hard to trust him to stay fully healthy all year long. The Lions, whether they have Smith or not, they're going to be looking for another starting defensive end to pair long term with Aiden Hutchinson. But again, Hutchinson, how full go is he going to be? I mean, he could have played apparently if they went the distance this year, so you'd think he could be full go week one. So they'll sit down, they'll figure out, is it worth keeping him? Do we want a little bit of extra spending money for this year? So I think one that's maybe close to 50-50. Maybe they're leaning towards keeping him since it's not a ton of savings, but it kind of felt like a rental when they traded for him at the deadline. So one to watch there for Detroit. The Bengals have a few that we're going to talk about. Alex Kappa, who was a big-time free agency signing a few years ago, had a brutal season for them this year. So are they looking to upgrade on the offensive line? Now, Kappa does have some good experience. He had good play before this year. So typically, $8 million savings isn't a ton, right? You're not going to be able to find a decent guard, and he was less than decent last year. So it is a tough decision. They're going to be going, do we want to make this hole right here? Do we have somebody to step up? Can we find someone? We have a little bit of spending money. We have to worry about T. Higgins. We have to sign Jamar Chase for the future. That's more future money. Do we need this $8 million? So it'll be a tough decision here. Based on a season this year, you would say most definitely rather have the $8 million. So he's going to be cut, but it's not that simple for the reasons I explained. So some interesting decisions for the Cincinnati Bengals this offseason. And another one is Geno Stone, who they just signed last offseason, was very good for the Baltimore Ravens, but he was a rotational guy for the Baltimore Ravens. And it was kind of one of those guys where, is he going to work in every scheme, in every system? And it didn't really work out with Cincinnati, but the whole defense didn't really work out this year. And they changed defensive coordinators. They bring in Al Golden from Notre Dame, who's a solid defensive coach. Well, at least he was in college. We'll see how it is in the NFL. But maybe he wants his own guys. Maybe he sees Stone as a fit. And again, they just signed him last offseason. So do they want to give up on him now? So tough decision here for Cincinnati. 6.4 isn't a ton of money, but maybe they would rather have that. It adds up. If they cut Kappa, if they cut Stone, we're going to talk about another guy. We talked about in the part 1 video, we talked about Sam Hubbard. It starts to add up. Then you have a ton of money where you can sign Chase long term. And again, that's more future money anyways. People make too much of a big of a deal about the money now for this year. And then maybe they can bring T. Higgins back. That's where this money comes into play, and make other moves because they got to revamp a lot of this defense. So, again, more tough decisions for Cincinnati. And here's one that would be a little more surprising, I would think, than the other two for Cincinnati. The previous two we just talked about, that'd be Sheldon Rankins, another recent signing last offseason. Pretty solid defensive tackle. He's always been good, but a little bit up and down and had injuries earlier in his career. And the Bengals absolutely needed to solve the interior defensive line issue going into this season. They signed Sheldon Rankins. When they signed him, is that really what they are fit, what they're looking for? They're looking for more of the run stuffers. They had him playing nose tackle at times. They had guys that weren't nose tackle playing nose tackle at times. So I don't know if they found the correct fit. We'll see how Al Golden feels about a guy like Rankins, but he is a good ball player. 8.6. He's probably worth more than 8.6. So maybe leaning towards just keeping him, but he also didn't really solve the issue. Maybe they'd rather have that extra spending money. So there's 3 guys in this video alone. And we had some in the other video for the Cincinnati Bengals. Another intriguing team to watch this offseason because future extension for Jamar Chase. What do they do at T. Higgins right now? Do they cut Hubbard? Do they revamp the defense, try to get it going right away? Intriguing team, to say the least. Maybe another one that's really not fully expected out of the Houston Texans. Nico Autry was suspended for a little bit to start this year, but then he was very good for them when he was able to play, even though he's up there in age. But another year older, the Texans are a little thin on cap space right now, and man, they got to go out and get receivers to for C.J. Stroud around Nico Collins. They got to go out and just redo the guard position, basically, and maybe even right tackle. They don't have a ton of needs, but they have very important ones that are going to cost a lot of money, and they don't have a ton of ways of freeing space. So maybe you move on from Autry. It would only make sense if it was a post-June 1st cut, and at that time they would free $8.8 million. But still a good ball player, even though he's up there in age, so a tough decision for Houston. Feels like there's a lot of talk surrounding Deebo Samuel. Will he be cut? Will he be traded? If they cut him, they would have to designate him a post-June 1st release. Otherwise, they would lose cap space. So that would then free $5.1 million. I'm leaning towards he's not cut. I put him in this video because it's being talked about and there's some sort of possibility. I think if it happens, the only reason would be because maybe Deebo Samuel wants to change the scenery. Maybe he wants to go somewhere else. The Niners got Ayuk coming back. Pearsall is really taken off. He was just a rookie this past year. They like Jawan Jennings, so maybe he just wants a new home. Maybe he doesn't really feel like he fits with that offense anymore and with Purdy. So if they cut him, just free that $5.1 million, that would be the reason, because the Niners aren't desperate for the $5.1 million. They're not desperate just to get rid of him, even though he was disappointing at times this year. So I'm counting on him being back But it could be a post-June 1st designation as a trade as well, and they can free some space. Otherwise, they would lose a lot of money. So maybe a little more likely traded than cut, but maybe the most likely scenario is he is back. But definitely will be a lot of talk around Deebo Samuel this offseason. John Franklin Myers, defensive lineman for the Denver Broncos, who was somewhat recently acquired for them for this season. Pretty good ball player. I mean, he can play D-end. He can slide into 3 technique as well. He was playing 40% of snaps around there for Denver, down the stretch. So is he that valuable to them? He's a good football player for them. Obviously, the Broncos aren't desperate to clear $7 million, but they'll sit down and they'll try to figure out, is $7 million more valuable to us, or is John Franklin Myers more valuable, I should say, to us? So it'd be kind of a tough decision. Again, it's not 100% necessary, but one to watch and a pretty good versatile defensive lineman that could play interior and off the edge for almost any team. Pretty scheme versatile as well. Here's a big one that would surprise a lot of people. Grady Jarrett, longtime star defensive tackle for the Atlanta Falcons. Maybe not that star that he once was, but still a damn good football player. The other video, we talked about David Onyemata, more likely cut if they cut him. Then are they going to cut another defensive tackle, their star in Grady Jarrett? Maybe unlikely. So this is one of those ones in this video where it's like people are going to go, yeah, right, probably not going to happen. Understandable, that's your response, but there is some chance here. It's somewhat realistic. $16.2 million is a lot of money, and you can make the argument that this is kind of similar to the Jonathan Allen one. You can kind of make the argument that maybe he's worth it. But here's the thing. Talk about compare to Jonathan Allen. Here's the difference between the Commanders and the Falcons. The Commanders do not need to make cuts because they have they're good right now. They're fine. The Falcons, they got to clear space. They have to clear space. They're in the red right now, and they have ways to do it. So maybe they move on from Grady Jarrett. They have some young guys to kind of step into that role. They can add other guys that are cheaper, or guys through the draft. The D tackle class is absolutely loaded. So could they move on from Jarrett, get from the red to the green financially in terms of cap space, clear $16.2 million? It'd be a heck of a move. I think it's somewhat possible for Atlanta. And here's one, Kirk Cousins, that wouldn't surprise a lot of people. A little different than Grady Jarrett here, but why it is interesting is the Falcons lose money if they just cut him straight up. They would have to make him a post-June 1st designation, and they would free nothing, but at this point they wouldn't lose anything. So they would have to, each team has a couple post-June 1st designations where you can make the move now, but label it post-June 1st, and you free more space. But in this case, you'd be freeing nothing, but it's better than losing money, cutting him the normal way. So interesting situation. The Falcons would wait this out. They would try to get a trade. Some team could trade for him, but if they can't get that deal done, they'll eventually I wouldn't think it would happen right away, but it wouldn't happen right away in my opinion. And they would make him a post-June 1st move, and they would free zero, but at least they wouldn't lose a ton, and then he'd be free to sign anywhere else. So again, people might go, should he be on this video? Should be in the last one because it's not really a surprising name to move on from the Falcons. Well, again, it's an interesting situation, and they could trade him. It's not necessarily he has to get cut. So I guess an intriguing name to watch back-to-back off seasons. Braden Smith, the Colts right tackle. Maybe another one of these ones on the video where it'd be a bit surprising, a little more surprising, but the Colts will sit down and say, is Braden Smith more valuable to us, or is $16.7 million more valuable to us, given that we maybe have replacements and Braden Smith does have some durability concerns? And I know the Colts aren't really desperate, I should say, to free the 16, even though it's a lot of money. They typically have money to work with, but they are looking to actually make moves, it sounds like, this offseason. So be an interesting decision there. Really good right tackle. Again, durability concerns. The Colts are really good with coaching and developing offensive linemen. So I wouldn't really be too worried about, that specific position. If they moved on from Smith, it'd be understandable. This is kind of one that's really not being talked about right now, but I think somewhat possible. Jamel Dean of the Bucs, another tough decision. The Bucs don't absolutely necessarily have to do this, even though they do need to kind of clear some space. But this one right here, a pretty good corner that they've liked. They've kind of chose to keep him and moved on from Carlton Davis a few years ago. So they like Dean. But he another one that has durability concerns, and the pass defense needs to be upgraded either way for the Buccaneers. So cut him. Free 8.2. It's a good amount of money, but for Dean, is it a ton? So kind of a tough decision here, but one I definitely could see the Buccaneers doing. And now we got a few players from the New Orleans Saints who have been in a financial situation, to say the least. They're starting the year way down in the red. They have to clear a ton of space because it's a rule by the new league year to get just to even, and they got to clear more to be able to make moves, and they keep doing this and kind of digging themselves a hole. They have no choice to kind of dig themselves a little hole to get to zero, but to me, they gotta get to zero, and they gotta cut by cutting and trading guys first, and then if they absolutely have to restructure contracts, do that, and they should not make big signings that cost a lot of money. They kind of got to start fresh. Will they actually do that? We will see, but the way these contracts are structured, they can't clear money the easy way. They can't just cut Taysom Hill right now and free $10 million. It would have to be a post-June 1st designation. They could cut him right now and make him a post-June 1st designation, and eventually clear the $10 million. And they just got to do it. He's coming off an injury, and he's a tough player, but they're changing coaches. Are they going to be needing the Taysom Hill style player? Long term, no. Go get a Riley Leonard in undrafted free agency. I don't know. Bryson Daly. Go get a new Taysom Hill. So just do it. He's coming off the injury. Mentioned that. Free that space. It cannot hurt. You're not going to win a Super Bowl at Taysom Hill. As fun of a player he is. So to me, they just got to go and do it. Will they actually do it? We will see. Another one, big name player, still a good player, Tyrann Mathieu. It would have to be a post-June 1st move, and each team only has a couple of these, so it's a little tough to choose. And you only free 6.2, but where is Mathieu going to get right now? You got a new staff coming in. You need the money. Move on from him. Clear that, eventually clear that 6.2, I should say. Call it a day. I think it just needs to be done for the New Orleans Saints. Between Taysom Hill and Tyrann Mathieu, they're bound to do one. Maybe they'll do both. I think they should. We'll see. And this one's a little different. I mean, financially, it's kind of the same. Post-June 1st move, $11 million, but it's Cam Jordan. You don't absolutely have to cut Cam Jordan. It'd be tough to see him play anywhere else, a Saints legend. You want him to finish there. He probably wants to finish, but if you get super, super desperate and you still need to clear more money, could do it with Cam Jordan. Or I think I'm not counting on this one to happen. I think the other two should. I think one or two of them do. I'm not counting on this one, nor am I saying it should happen. But there is a scenario where maybe Cam Jordan doesn't really care about finishing his career with the Saints. Maybe, even if he said it in the past, maybe he wants to go, I'm going to go one more year. I want to go to a contender. Let me go. I'm going to go sign there. I'll retire as a Saint. And then they kind of agree to part ways. So that's kind of the scenario I could see. This one would be a little bit more surprising because he's one of those guys. It would be really weird to see him in a different jersey other than New Orleans Saints jerseys. So interesting one, but the Saints always have some tough decisions. But I kind of just hope for their sake of their future that they first cut, trade players if you can. We talked about Derek Carr in the last video, the part 1 video. Check that out, more likely cuts. Do what you can, cuts, trades, and then obviously it's a rule to get to zero. To get out of negative in terms of cap space going into the new league year, and props to the NFL for having that as a rule, unlike some of the other sports. But then if you absolutely have to restructure contracts to get there, do it. But don't go crazy. I know it's tempting, but don't go crazy with your spending. You kind of got to cut your losses, and you almost got to throw in the towel for a couple years, and you try to win games, of course. So a tough situation for New Orleans. But it was a long list of players we talked about in this video. Definitely guys to keep an eye on. Again, part 1 had the more likely guys to be cut. We're also rolling out already with free agency videos, different players that I like, expensive free agents, where they could fit. A lot more of those videos to come, including predictions as we get closer to free agency and grades once we are in free agency, and draft content along the way, covering the Senior Bowl very recently, and all kinds of draft content. So exciting times here, even though the season is over here at the Goat House. So join us, like, subscribe, turn notifications on. That's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.